Last week, we talked about what it meant to follow Jesus. We talked about being a disciple and how that changes the direction of your life. We talked about Deuteronomy 6, where Moses urges us to love God with our whole heart. And when we love God with our whole heart, it changes us and it changes those around us. Today, I want you to hear a story about how a changed heart helped a family turn to God. And this story comes from someone I know really well, my dad. This is my dad. He loves sports, specifically baseball and basketball. He's got a ton of bobbleheads. He's pretty silly most of the time, and one of the most generous people I've ever met. More than that, he follows Jesus. He studies the Bible, serves others, and teaches others to do the same. But his story of following Jesus, it doesn't start with him. So let's hear from him how things went through a radical change.
As I was growing up, I didn't think too much about things. You just take it kind of for granted. And then as I got older, I started to think about my family. For instance, I found out that my dad, his family never went to church. My dad's dad had 5 brothers, and they were always at the bars, and they were always the one in town that were causing all the problems and fights. Never ever cared about going to church. But my dad had an aunt, and this aunt invited my dad and his sisters to go to church with her. And so my dad went. Somewhere along the line, I'm not sure exactly when, but my dad became a Christian. He gave his life to Christ. Well, one time on a Sunday evening service, there was a man from a Bible college there, and he introduced my dad to what Bible college was all about. My dad decided to go, and eventually he became a minister. He got into the ministry, and we moved to Montana as he started a church there. You know, like I said, I took all that for granted because really, had my dad not been invited to church by his aunt, then my dad never would have gone to Bible college. And honestly, I might not have been a Christian. He wouldn't have met my mom. But at the same time too, though, my dad, because of his faith in Christ, then gave that to me and introduced me to Christ because I was at church and I was listening to his preaching and I went to Sunday school and all those things. But I never regretted that. And honest, I handed that on to my kids as well. I made my kids go to church, made them go to Sunday school, made them serve in the church. And I think that way they were introduced to Christ as well. Through the church. And from that time, you think about it, our family could have gone a whole lot of different directions from there. But I'm glad that my dad cared enough about Christ to share Christ with me. I'm glad that I had children that we could also share Christ with. And now I even have grandchildren that we can feed Christ into them as well as they grow up and learn what it's all about to be a Christian.
I love hearing that story because it shows how a decision to follow Jesus can have an impact for generations to come. Do you know what a generation is? My grandfather made a decision that helped my father to have faith, which helped me to have faith. And now I'm trying to help my kids have faith as well. So can you think of a parent or a grandparent that had a big impact on your faith? See, this is what God desires for the nation of Israel and what He desires for us too. That we would be faithful followers of Jesus who would teach and raise up another generation after generation, after generation, after generation, after generation of followers of Jesus. Psalm 76, 4-7 says, "We will not hide from them their children, but tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and His might, and the wonders that He has done. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which He commanded our fathers to teach to their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise to tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but to keep His commandments." The Bible tells us about families like this. Eunice and Lois are the mother and grandmother of Timothy, who Paul encouraged to lead the church in Ephesus by training him. That's 3 generations of Christ followers that were celebrated by Paul because of their faith. Have you ever thought about the children unborn? Imagine 80 years from now, sitting around with your kids and grandkids, maybe even your great-grandkids, and hearing how your daily decision to follow Jesus has impacted their life. Have you ever thought about the impact that you will have for Christ in your life? Listen, I know, it seems crazy to think about 80 years from now. But did you know that you are an example of generational discipleship right now? Do you have any brothers or sisters? Are you helping them follow Jesus better? Or maybe it's someone here at church who's younger than you and looks up to you. Are you representing Christ well to them? Are you listening to your parents and participating when they're talking to you about following Jesus? We all have a responsibility to help others follow Jesus. And it's God's plan that we should try to live it out the best that we can.